Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Business as Usual. This is Audrey Russo, and I have a great program here today, so don't go away. I think you're going to really be interested in all the things that we're going to talk about. I am president of the Tech Council, and joined with me is my co-host, Jonathan Kirsten. He's all things media. A couple of things about today's call, and it wouldn't be possible without our long-term friends at Huntington Bank and the Webb Law Firm. Both of those companies have been with us right from the onset in almost everything that we do. So we really appreciate them taking a bet on this work by knitting the community together. So I also want to tell all of you that your microphones, we've muted all of you, although I am hearing a little bit of some sort of ambient noise. There really is some noise going on. So Brian, make sure that we've muted everyone except for our guests. And that said, we have an opportunity for chat. So there's a chat room right at the bottom, and this is your opportunity to ask questions and make some comments related to today's conversation, but not to sell your wares. Really appreciate that. So today's session, we have three esteemed leaders from our community here in Pittsburgh, and we're going to focus on the role that the LGBTQIAP community plays in Pittsburgh's technology innovation industries and explore some of the unique challenges and opportunities that can exist for regions that really embrace creativity, diversity, and inclusion. So we're going to have a conversation that we're going to hopefully dig in a little deeper in terms of some of the topics. But first, I want to just introduce the guests by name and then let them just talk about for a minute about who they are. So first we have Denise DeSimone, CEO and founder of C-Leveled. Denise.
Hello, thanks for having me, Audrey.
And then Israel Alguindigue, he is PhD and Vice President of Analytics of Fortive Corporation. And if you haven't heard of Fortive, they actually acquired Industrial Scientific, and who has been a long-term partner in the work that we do at the Tech Council. But Israel comes to us recently from Chicago, and he'll tell you a little bit about his role and the work that he does. And then last and certainly not least is Rick. Rick, if I can see your face there, Rick Cancelliere. He's CEO of Treatspace. So I'm going to pass the baton really quickly, and I'm going to introduce a more recent to Pittsburgh, Israel. Israel, come to the, tell us a little bit about who you are, what your experience has been, and anything personal that you think you'd like to share that people should know about you.
Yes, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. Like you said, I came from Chicago. I used to work for a company called Uptake there, and came to work for Fortive here. We're very fortunate to be co-located with Industrial Scientific. And prior to that, I was at GE and Emerson, another iconic industrial companies. And I also serve on a couple of corporate boards. But more importantly, I am married to a wonderful guy named Brocky for the last 30 years. And we have a son, Pablo, who's 24, and who are delighted to have here in Pittsburgh during the pandemic, because his office in Chicago has been closed. So thank you so much for having me.
Wow. Well, lucky for you to have your family together. There's always bitter sweetness to all of this. So now I'm going to jump over to Rick. Rick, CEO of Treatspace. Good afternoon. Tell us a little bit about you. Rick is on mute.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. My name is Rick Cancelliere. I was born and raised in the Pittsburgh area. I grew up in an old steel town called Elwood City. I was raised by a single grandmother who taught me that gay people were mentally ill. And I grew up in a church that taught me that gay people were immoral. And I even went on mission trips to every continent except for Antarctica, just on Christian mission trips. And I met gay kids my age and learned that I was neither ill nor immoral. And my first jobs were in technology. I think I lucked out. I started some technology companies, and those companies opened a lot of doors for me. I paid for my education at Pitt. I was the first in my family to graduate from a four-year university. And I started a software company, Treatspace, that tracks the number of lives we save every month. And I've been incredibly lucky to be surrounded by a team of people that support and celebrate me, from my board of directors to my employees. And my partner is a brain scientist in the laboratory at Pitt focused on Alzheimer's. And I've had a very interesting life here in Pittsburgh. One of my neighbors last year was cited by the police for calling me a faggot. Another neighbor calls me Tiger King because I have a dog. And I've learned when to draw the line and how to do it more often, while also learning how to thrive.
Thank you. Thank you for your candor on that. Denise DeSimone, CEO and founder of C-Level and many other companies. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am from Uniontown. I've been in this area all my life. I moved away during the 80s and ended up running a good successful business. I was able to sell it and decided to come back to Pittsburgh. I've had a similar experience to Rick because I grew up in a small town, and I only heard about 20 times a year that I just haven't met the right man. But I'm fortunate that I have a wonderful spouse. We have 3 kids, all boys, and we're living probably a couple miles from my office. So life is good. My partner is a teacher, which I'm very proud of, and can't understand why I could never do that job. But I'm fortunate, and we're happy to be here.
So here we have, we've set this table here with 3 different personas and 3 different sets of experiences and lenses. So Israel, you moved here a year and a half ago, right? And then of course we've been in this pandemic for the last, few months. What is it like for you to be a leader in Pittsburgh and be a gay man?
You know what, I'm still trying to figure that out. Coming from Chicago and Minneapolis, where, the community is much more visible, it's been a difficult transition from that regard, because I haven't really met that many people that are leading and are members of the community. But I think in general, there is a great disposition from the companies themselves, the enterprises themselves, in learning. I've had so many interesting conversations about people that are just trying to learn what this is all about. And it looks from the outside like a very complex community that's very diverse in and of itself. But I've always found that intrigue, interest in learning about how to best work and how to best, extract the contribution that we can make to the tech community here. But it's very early for me. I'm still trying to figure it out, to be frank with you.
No, I really appreciate that. And, I take a personal responsibility in terms of all of that as well. So let's go to Rick. What's it like for you, Rick? What's it like for you to be an executive in the startup community and to attract and retain people to work for you?
So earlier on, I think that you have to learn when to be on guard and when you can be transparent. And if you're lucky, you build a foundation that's as solid as concrete, and you find support. Your enemies also find you. They attack you. Sometimes the enemies are hidden. But I think that Pittsburgh has a solid foundation for the LGBT community in its hopes and dreams. I think it wants to be good for us. And I think that it doesn't necessarily know, like most Rust Belt cities, how to get there. But I think that I'd like to imagine a world where leaders like myself find boardrooms where sexual orientation is as irrelevant as your glasses or your shoe size, right? I think that we'd like to find a place where we don't have to question whether our partners will offend an investor, right? You know, being a member of a community shouldn't really be any different than anything else. And I think that ultimately, there's a tax that we pay for being different here. And I think that it's more significant than other regions in the United States. And that tax introduces walls, hurdles, and obstacles that have to be overcome. And in Pittsburgh, like other minorities, right, you have to become very skilled at overcoming obstacles and paying the higher taxes if you want to excel. And if you're able to do it, kudos to you, right? And there's a lot of learnings that you get going through that.
So that's interesting. I want to jump to Denise quickly, because Denise has shared some stories. I mean, she has plenty of stories to talk about what it's like to be a lesbian running a company in Pittsburgh and getting work, right? And just getting work. And so Denise, I want to put you on the spot. If you can, you don't have to give names of companies, but give some examples of the tribulations that you've been through.
Yeah, you know, when I left Pittsburgh, you know, the climate here in the community was rough. And when I decided to come back, I was expecting it to be a whole lot different. And in reality, it wasn't that different. And, you know, I agree with Rick's points. I mean, I think Pittsburgh as a city wants to be a good citizen for our community, but it really isn't achieving that. You know, I've had early on, you know, people tell me that, you know, they were taking us out of the RFP process because they didn't do business with my kind. I've had people advise me that I should let a heterosexual guy present at a board meeting on services that we were providing. So, you know, I don't think the city does a great job of helping support us. And I believe while there's a lot of changes that we've made and we've improved as a city, I think for those of us in the business community, it hasn't. I mean, when you look at the City of Pittsburgh website, while I really like a shade tree committee as part of the government, there's no LGBTQ community committee on the website. So, you know, I think we're in that the city, you know, we like to check the boxes, but I really don't believe there's a serious push to help improve our community.
So, you know, Israel's comes to this town, and he comes out of Chicago, for example, or even Minneapolis. And Minneapolis, which is like a comparable city to Pittsburgh. He points out, and I'm going to give the floor back to him a little bit. He was, some of the words I hear him use is surprised, hard to navigate, not telling our story, etc. Israel, could you compare to us, like if you would have imagined us doing it well in terms of being welcoming or being seen as an inclusive city? What would that look like? And give us your perspective from your experiences, which are richer than the rest of us who are, you know, here right now on this panel. So, Brian, can you unmute Israel? Sometimes with Zoom, you like have to hit the thing like 3 or 4 times. There you go.
I'm back live. You know, that's a really, really interesting question. I think that from a marketing perspective, what I think we could do a lot better is to market the city and the technology landscape here as a great wealth of opportunity for diverse people, right? And I think we do great work in marketing the city to tech, but we don't really talk about how inclusive we strive to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be a big part of that. And I think also, you know, in order for that to become reality, you have to have some kind of support structure, right? And I keep thinking about
Mm-hmm.
organizations in Chicago that are out in tech is one that I remember vividly and with which I was involved. They're organizations that are there to highlight, you know, the wins, the talent, the opportunities, the networking. And I think something like that will help us a lot here to get to that point. But I think in general, it's also different because people are a lot more visible in those markets. In Minneapolis or Chicago, there is tons of leaders that are out and they reach out to the community and they become mentors to many of us along the way. And that helps kind of pull people up. And I think that some of that is what we need to do here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what about some comments from all of you? I mean, we know the backdrop, the pandemic, everything going on here. It's going on all around the world. And, I worry that during this period of time that we may have taken a step back in terms of really trying to build on some of the stories and the assets of all people, because we just have gotten really preoccupied. But what is really not working now? What is not working? I mean, Israel gives a great example of the storytelling and the marketing and sort of like just being able to be effusive and everyone know that this is the environment. What's not working? Denise, Rick?
Well, to me, I don't think that the city of Pittsburgh is really dedicated to the cause. I think it's everybody. I don't think anybody in our community or many, communities were surprised when Amazon said we weren't really that diverse.
Right.
So I think the city of Pittsburgh likes to say that we support, but when there's no initiative coming from the city, it's hard. I don't believe. And like I said, I used one example of, on the website, there's boards and commissions, and, we should be represented on one of those commissions. I mean, for a year, they've been toying with this advisory committee. Well, that's just not enough.
Okay. So you're saying it's back to the whole thing about check boxes that we talked about early on. Rick, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure. And I'll preface by saying I think there's a lot that is working and that there is a lot that can be improved upon, but this discussion is about what isn't working. So I'm going to harp on a few things.
What it's about. Right.
Important. I don't want to come across as a Debbie Downer. First off, I think that at least regarding the pandemic and all the racial injustice issues that are happening right now, I find that right now we need to support the African-American colleagues that we have in the city and address injustices in a number of ways. I mean, Stonewall, its anniversary was last year, and the whole effort began as a riot because of injustice in the community and murders and raids that were happening. And I think that, yes, it's Pride Month and there hasn't been much discussion about it, but I think that it might not be our time right now. And so that might be the right or wrong thing to say, but I feel like there's other platforms that are incredibly important that need attention right now. And when I think about what's not working, I can drill down into a couple areas, and I'll happily start with legislators. Less than 2 hours after our administration was sworn into office, all mentions of LGBTQ issues were removed from the White House's webpage, right? I mean, LGBTQ data was completely rescinded and struck from the 2020 census, right? We're appointing judges that are anti-LGBTQ. Trump was joking about Pence's desire to hang LGBTQ people in 2017, right? We have legislators that refuse to even condemn or attack the crimes that are happening in Chechnya, where gays are being murdered for being gay in the street, right? I mean, you have a country that's refusing to let LGBTQ people seek asylum here and flee from violence in countries where they're being killed. I mean, legislation is a big issue for me. And so it may not be just a Pittsburgh issue, right? I think it's a national discussion. But when you look at the workplace, I think that employment discrimination against LGBTQ people is an issue. And our current administration is submitting briefs to the Supreme Court supporting discrimination, right? And they're banning transgenders in the military. They're rolling back non-discrimination protections, right? And they're issuing rules to license discrimination at the Department of Justice level. So there's a lot that's broken from a legislation and workplace standpoint. And there's some major challenges too. And it's not just our city. I mean, you look at public companies, like there's not a single Black person on the board of Adobe, NVIDIA, Cisco, or Oracle, or even Procter & Gamble, right? There's major issues around diversity right now throughout the whole country.
So thank you for that. Jonathan, there are some statements in here there's statements and some questions, and I'd like to give Israel a chance to hear some of them, because some of them are around being provincial.
Yeah.
And can you read a couple of these? I mean, 2 of them are in here.
Absolutely. And I also have a question that came in on the private chat for Denise as well too, that I want to get to, which I think is a really good question. But
Okay.
So here's some insight from Michael Steiner, and curious to see what Israel has to say about this. So this is a little bit a long one here, so bear with me here. He says, when I was a student in university for the first time in the 80s, and some sexual choices were illegal, he thought this was unheard of. I thought to make it illegal was unlawful. To believe that in 2020, this is still an issue makes me feel that we are all to blame. Otherwise, how could this be? 40 years later, this is still an issue. Why?
Okay. So keep going though. Keep going. They're talking. Yeah. There's something in here about newcomers.
Let me see if I can find out my chat. So I have something here from Brent. Says there is no information specifically focusing on newcomers, which means we as a region need to dissect the newcomer population by realities, professions, students, country of origin, gender, churches. In this way, newcomers will find a group where they can find common points of interest. Interesting point there. Many families would love to have groups alike. Also, human resource managers prefer to hire locals and so on. So I think that's a really good.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Israel, in the time that you've been here?
I think I hear the comment, and I know that this is a community that's very grounded in family, and so family is very important, and it's hard to network. My personal experience has been that that it has been at times difficult. It's all about trying to get into the right circle, right? And that's probably a lot of personal work that everyone has to do. The other thing that I would say is, I don't ever believe that anything is just one dimension. Any problem is just one dimensional. I think we all have a responsibility and a burden in what's going on. And I think we all have to become more visible and ask for what we want. We have to go and seek out this mentorship. I always tell people, I talk to MBA classes every year, at least 3 different classes. And I tell everyone, reach out on LinkedIn, and I'd love to be your mentor. And I rarely get one single person to take me on that offer, right? And that is a really bad thing to let pass when somebody offers you that kind of support. So I think we all have a responsibility on what's going on. We all have to reach out and try to get what we want and claim what's ours, frankly. And there's another comment here about that people have their own networks and it's hard for them to share it. And I think that's one of those things that I think about as a not because you share your network are you going to have less of a network. Because you share your network, you continue to cultivate great connections. So I think we just have to look at it differently, right? And realize that the people that we need to grow this economy locally and to grow the tech community and to find the talent that we need are not here necessarily. We cannot make enough of those. We have to let people from the outside come here and help us out.
Absolutely.
And I deal with that every day.
Audrey, I've got a question for Denise. Can I interject real fast if possible?
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to get back to the thing about hiring, so keep going.
Yeah, I really want to get to this. So Denise, obviously, with you also being a woman, that has to make things even doubly hard for you at times as well, because you're facing discrimination often, I would assume, on both ends, being a woman and also being gay. So I would assume like you have to become one tough cookie to get to where you are these days.
Yeah, it's challenging. When I first started out in tech, there was nothing about me that was appealing to the tech community. A gay woman in tech. So it's been a challenge, and I think it's a little bit like Rick said. We have to be better and smarter and more creative and all of that to even get a seat at the table. And I think, the older I get, and now with children, I also have a responsibility that, I have 3 white boys that I have to teach to be respectful to women, respectful to LGBT, be their own person, be respectful, and make sure they understand that Black Lives Matter. And I mean, it is a world of responsibility right now. And, for us as members of our community, we also have to take a little responsibility for the lack of progress. We have to ask ourselves, are we doing enough for the younger people coming up? And I think that answer also is no. While it's nice to say, I don't think it is one-dimensional either. Like Israel said, I think it's a situation that we have to really be committed to the younger people coming up.
So there's still a couple of more. Someone just did a shout out to you.
Yeah.
Michael Steiner said, "My God, a woman in gay who needs to apologize for being amazing." Rick.
I would like to comment on that. There's a researcher named Vivian Ming that was published in The Advocate a couple years ago, that she did this amazing research where she applied machine learning and big data to analyze workplace bias. And she's the one that kind of revealed the tax on being different, right? And she called it a quantifiable cost of not being a straight white male in the workplace. And it's paid in the form of additional degrees, longer work histories, more prestigious schools, and generally having to overprove yourself everywhere. And it was funny because she started to apply financials to it. She said, okay, in the UK, being gay costs you an additional $70,000 on average more than being straight, largely in longer work tenures. But being a lesbian in Eastern Asia, right, in the tech industry, comes with a bill that's $1.2 million in additional education and time versus other people. And then she began to compute it down into specific cases. Like, she can actually tell you what's the tax on being Black, gay, and at Exxon in Houston, right?
Wow.
And it's really interesting. But I think what's more important too is it says something that's really important. You have to work harder just to get the same outcomes. Like, Black people have the same feeling, women have the same feeling, and when you have multiple layers of that on the same element, yeah, I say this as a white male, right? I mean, young gays internalize that tax and give up on STEM careers because of it, and leadership, right? And they choose to focus their lives on fun or family and anything else where they just can't be taxed. And we try to convince them to choose a career path and lean in, right? But What sort of choice is that when you're working twice as hard for half the outcome when other options are available? And this is what we see every day in our category. And the choice is fundamentally inequitable and distributed. And so you have to really look at things like, you know, for trans people, the choice of gender transition means sacrificing everything, not just a career, family, and friends in some cases, but every impact they ever had hoped for in the world. And that's how they feel, but it's wrong because it's a tax that's placed on them by society that isn't and shouldn't be there, right? And so how many amazing lives have been, you know, not lived because the tax imposes different choices? That's the question. And that's why I love the research that Vivian did, because it applies reality to it.
Well, I want to jump now back to Israel, because both Rick and Denise have been able to carve their own companies, right? So it gives both of you a different kind of autonomy. And, you know, it has its pros and cons like everything. Israel works in corporate America, right? He works in an environment. And one of the things that I've talked to him offline about is how do you decide who you work for, right? Because he's not the CEO yet. I bet you one day he will be of some company, but he's not the CEO yet. How do you decide what your fit is given your history? So Brian, if you can unmute Israel, I'd just like to talk about, because, you know, Pittsburgh is made up of corporate companies as well, and lots of people that are working in tech, and you are recruiting new people for your team. So Israel?
Well, that's a good question that have many answers, but I would say, to give you a pretty direct answer, I think early in my career, I wanted to work for the big names that had, you know, great cloud, right? And what you find out is that you have, there's still a lot of what I call implicit bias, right? Stuff that people don't talk about, but that comes to the decision making as it relates to growth and opportunities, etc. I think at some point I decided that when a company wasn't a good fit for me, I will get out. And so I made that decision. And since then, I have actually been pretty direct about this issue when I'm interviewing for a job. And so I had the opportunity to work in Chicago for a great startup. And then when the opportunity came to work at Fortive, that was one of the first questions I asked. It's like, this is my family. This is what you know, the things that I value. And I then, you know, started a conversation about, you know, how that contributes to the overall culture of the company and their overall, you know, internal dialogue around diversity and inclusion. So I'm at the point now where that's central to a choice about where I work. And it's not only at Fortive, which is a company that actually lives this value on a daily basis and really, really care for the people that are diverse and want to grow that segment of our workforce. But I also did that when I was asked to be on a board. It's like, because boards tend to be different. They tend to be very conservative at times. And that was one of the things that I brought up first. It's like, well, this is my reality. Are you okay with that? Or is that fit with your strategy, right? So you kind of have to take control and not let that be a second thought, but be upfront when you make the decision.
So the good news, Israel, is that you are in Pittsburgh, in a place where perhaps we don't have the out community in leadership and compared to other places where you've been, but you're working for a very inclusive company that embraces your values. So we probably have a lot to learn from Fortive.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, corporate America in general has made great progress, but still there's so much more work to do. And like I think someone mentioned earlier, we also have to take responsibility about how do we groom these companies for the next generation of LGBTQ workers and talent. It's a big deal. And I think we have a big role to play in that.
Good. So we have like lots of statements here. One, Rick Cancelliere wants to know if you can share that URL report. We'll figure that out, and I want to get that out on our link as well. So we're seeing through the chats that some people are saying, oh my gosh, thank you for the richness of this conversation. But also, I will say I never had an issue here being gay and I'm out, period. And I love seeing that as well. And I'm also hearing that people are talking just about the parochialism in Pittsburgh, and that many people just have never left Pittsburgh and tend to stay, whether that means they're from, you know, the concentric regions beyond. What, in terms of wrapping this up, what are some of the things that you think in the tech/innovation community we should be doing better? What do you think? Because I know each of you goes through your hiring. I know Israel's building a team here. Denise, you know, has certainly gone into, you know, hiring and developing new clients. Same thing for Treatspace. So what should we be doing as a tech community that supports our leaders that we're not doing now? Or, you know, what are the ideas?
I'll start quickly. I really like what Israel had to say earlier on about the organization of the community. And I think having an organization like Out in Tech here in Pittsburgh, you know, they have 16 cities that have chapters now with 40,000 members. And their whole purpose is to inspire, you know, and support LGBTQ folks in tech. And I think that having a platform where folks are organized, where there's a home, will start to set a stage for pollinization, I guess is the word, where, you know, like the bees are buzzing and people can work together to get out into the city and help foster the change that needs to happen. And I think organization is a really important piece of it. So I'll throw one idea out and I'll stop.
Okay. Okay. Denise?
Yeah, I think, you know, the tech community has a big voice in Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's risen to a city that is recognized for its tech. And I think what the tech community can do for our community is to help push things at the city level. Just help us push to where we're represented on committees, on boards, on, you know, so it really helps if our voice is heard. And I think, you know, those conversations and help from the tech community would be great.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Israel, are you Israel, are you hiring people? Are you looking for talent right now?
Yes.
What are you hiring for?
So we're building an AI practice here at Industrial Scientific. So a lot of the functions that we look for are data scientists and machine learning engineering people, data engineering, data architects, that kind of thing. But I think, Audrey, to kind of put you on the spot a little bit, I think, you know, the Tech Council has probably a big role to play here in
I want to hear
kind of like bringing people together, connecting the dots. I mean, this might be bigger than us. This might start with the universities, right? And do the students there know what resources are, what jobs are, and who is hiring the right, and it has a focus on diversity, right?
Right.
I think everything that Rick mentioned is also great, and what are great ways to think about it. But I would say, I go back to my point earlier, I think we need to all be visible. We need to all own this challenge and see how we can individually reach out and get more conversations going. But I think you can definitely, within the council, you know, have some great discussions like this. This might be a series for all we know, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering about that.
And give other leaders visibility as well. So thank you for doing this.
No, thank you. First of all, thank you all. We've gone over, but people are still here. And you can see by the chats, people had lots of statements of positivity and just deep appreciation for the three of you in terms of just your candor in a short period of time. And maybe we do continue to just have lots of conversations here and work on that. And those of you that are actually, you know, listening in can reach out to any of us, you know, and if you want to get a hold of Rick, you want to get a hold of Denise or Israel, we're happy to make, you know, those connections as it makes sense, because we want to get out of the way and forge these relationships. I am very lucky to know the three of these individuals, and I can tell you that they open my own eyes all the time in terms of perspective and change. And they all want to see change. And those are leaders. Those are people who are sticking their neck out and leading. So I deeply appreciate the three of you for being with us today. Let's hear from everyone that's on this call and others who want to join and figure out some good ways to bring some things to action. I don't look at this, the Tech Council doesn't look at this as a one event conversation. This is really just the beginning. And I really appreciate all of you spending time with us today. And thank you, Israel, Rick, and Denise, for the work that you do across our community. So with that note, I'll see everyone here tomorrow, and have a great rest of the day.
Good stuff.
Signing off.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.